fact, women play a key role in food systems in Tanzania, because when we talk of food systems, we mean the whole value chain from production to the table. And women contribute to 65% of the population in agriculture in Tanzania. And they contribute to around 80% of agri-produce. They are there from the farm because they take part in the farming. Then from farming, they are the ones to store what has been, first from farm to harvest. After harvesting, to store what has been harvested. They also distribute, in the case of food crops, they are also responsible for keeping the food for the whole season till next season of harvest. And also they make sure they sell their excess for them to buy other things that they don't produce. So I can say distribution storing is there at family level, but when it goes now to the market, that's where women, lag behind. On the business side, most agri companies are owned by men, and mostly in the market, the markets are dominated by middlemen, and middlemen are mostly men, as the name itself, speaks. So in the market, it's the men, and it's where now money is. Money is in the market, when selling in the market, not when producing, not when keeping at home for food, but it's when taking to the market. When it comes to export, most companies are men-owned. When it comes to big markets, most companies are men-owned. So they end up somewhere where there is little money. Where there is big money, it's now the role of men.
The role of women within the agricultural development sector in Tanzania is also very important, and women play an integral role here. So over recent years in Tanzanian policy, we can see there's been an increased commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment. So, for example, the National Roadmap report, which was produced in the lead up to the Food Systems Summit in 2021, had an emphasis on gender equality and women's empowerment there, and talked about the gender agricultural productivity gap, highlighting that it amounted to around $105 million, and that closing this gap could lift some 80,000 Tanzanians out of poverty each year. This was the claim within the report.
30% of all tenders, it's a law that they must go to women. It's there. But the implementation has not shown exactly the number of women who have benefited from that 30% favor to women. And not only that, in the municipal councils, there is also a bylaw, it's a law anyway, that the 10% from their collections, they're supposed to go to 4% to women, 4% to youths, and 2% to people with disabilities. Now, the advantage with women is that they fall under the 4 of women, the 4 of youth, and the 2 of the people with disabilities if they are disabled. So the law is there. So implementation of the law is for us private sector to push so that people qualify.
So in terms of the key evidence gaps, we broke these down into 3 key points. So the first one was looking at women's empowerment framings and conceptualizations and trying to understand the differences here, and also looking particularly within policy level at how the increased commitment towards gender equality and women's empowerment, how women are framed and approached within these approaches, and also who's kind of shaping this agenda as well. And as I mentioned, there's a need for more intersectional understanding here to kind of understand the diversity of women within these spaces. And there's also further research is needed to explore how this is translated down to the local level. And this is quite important considering much of Tanzania's policy is actioned more at the local level. So considering how commitments towards gender equality at national level are translated down to local government actors. In terms of value chains, the knowledge gaps were highlighted in where in when and what capacity women are able to engage in emerging commodity value chains, the drivers and barriers that kind of shape this engagement, and women's roles in these transitions and how that's shaped by the kind of shift towards export focus. And again, there's a need for more intersectional understanding of women here, so looking at the kind of differences in marital status, household demographics, and how this shapes gender roles across value chains. And in terms of One Health, knowledge gaps lie around kind of how the increased household income and potential reliance on markets through the shift to export focus of spices and other horticultural products, how that affects livelihood outcomes and household food security. The potential for backlash is also important to look at here. So this doesn't necessarily come out through the literature around spices in Tanga region, but certainly CARE's done a lot of work around as kind of household power dynamics shift as women potentially gain more financial independence or income, how that affects household power dynamics and the potential for increased gender-based violence there, or just also kind of the breakdown of relationships as well is important to look at. And also the role of middlemen within these value chains and the kind of how they shape the transition to export. And the third point was around leverage points. And as I mentioned, lots of the assumptions within much development policy and practice is around women's role within decision-making spaces, also their membership of groups as a kind of often used as a proxy for empowerment levels. So what we want to look at is kind of problematizing these assumptions a little bit more, and particularly looking around the kind of measurement of decision making and how that's often simplified into quite rudimentary sole decision making processes, and how that's used as a proxy for empowerment levels is important to look at.